Good morning, class 4 students. All right, let us continue with the same chapter, food and digestion. So, let us start with balanced diet. Now, what is a balanced diet? Let us see. What do you understand by the meaning balanced diet? A diet that contains all the nutrients in proper amount is called a balanced diet. We should eat a balanced diet to keep our body fully healthy and fit. So, the food that we eat should contain all the required nutrients that is needed by our body. If that food contains all the nutrients that is needed by our body, that is called a balanced diet. All right. So, a diet that contains all the nutrients in proper amount. So, that means the food that we eat should have the correct amount of nutrients that is needed by our body. That is called a balanced diet. We should eat a balanced diet to keep our body fully healthy and fit. So, in order to be healthy, in order to stay healthy, and in order to be fit, we should eat a diet that contains all these required nutrients. We should eat a balanced diet. So next, we're going to learn about digestion of food. The food that we eat is not directly used by the body to get energy. It is broken down into simpler forms for use. This process of breaking down of food into simpler forms is called digestion. The simplest form of food are various nutrients in their basic form. These nutrients are then taken to all parts of the body by the blood. So, let us see what is the meaning of digestion. Now, here it says that as soon as we eat our food, we do not get energy from that food. So, what happens then? As soon as we eat our food, as soon as we keep the food in our mouth, then only the process of digestion begin first. Now, what is this process of digestion? It means that food should be broken down into simpler forms so that our body will be able to take this food and distribute it to all parts of the body. That is called digestion. So, if the food that we eat is broken down into simpler forms so that our body can use that food and transport it to different parts of our body, that process of breaking down of food into simpler forms is called digestion. So, the simplest form of food are various nutrients in their basic form. These nutrients are then taken to all parts of the body by the blood. So, the food that we eat will be broken down into simpler forms. That means into the most simplest form so that our body can take that food and distribute it to all the parts of our body with the help of our blood. So why do we need to digest our food? We need to digest our food so that it will be broken down into simpler forms so that it will be easy for our body to take in that food and for our blood to distribute that food to all parts of our body. Now, digestion of food is a slow process. It takes a few hours for its completion. Several organs of our body help in digesting the food we eat. All the organs that help in digesting food are collectively referred to as digestive system. Now, here it says that digestion is a slow process. Now, what do you understand by digestion is a slow process? It means that the process of digesting our food, the process of breaking down our food into simpler forms is a very slow process. It means that it takes a lot of time to complete this process of digestion. It says here it takes a few hours for its completion. Several organs of our body help in digesting the food. That means there are many parts of our body that takes part in the process of digestion. So all these organs that takes part in digesting our food, they are called digestive system. So remember that digestion, it is a slow process and it takes a few hours for it to be completed. And many parts of our body takes part in the digesting of our food. And all these organs, all these body parts that take part in digesting our food are called digestive system. Now let us see what happens inside the mouth. When we eat food, what happens inside the mouth? The process of digestion begins from the moment we put a morsel in our mouth. As the food is chewed with the help of teeth, it is broken down into smaller pieces. The smaller food pieces get mixed with the digestive fluid called saliva, which is secreted by the salivary glands in the mouth. The saliva softens the chewed food and changes the insoluble starch into soluble sugar. So what happens as soon as we put even a small amount of food? When we put a morsel, it means a little food, just a small part of food. If we keep in our mouth, what will happen? As soon as the food is kept in our mouth, then and there only the process of digestion begins. As the food is chewed with the help of teeth, it is broken down into smaller pieces. So our teeth helps when we chew our food, though our teeth, it helps to break down our food into smaller pieces. Now these smaller food pieces, they will mix with the digestive fluid called saliva. So our mouth has these glands called salivary glands that produce saliva, and this saliva, it mixes with the food that is broken down by our teeth. So this saliva, it mixes with the food that we eat, and what does it do? It softens the chewed food. That means it makes the food that we eat to be soft, and it changes the insoluble starch into soluble sugar. So when we eat the food, it has something that is insoluble starch. Insoluble starch, it means the starch that cannot be dissolved. So this starch, it changes into soluble sugar. Now when it changes into soluble sugar, it means that the sugar that is turned from this insoluble starch, it is now dissolved. It can be dissolved in the mouth. So now it is called soluble sugar. So what happens? The saliva, it softens the chewed food and it helps in changing the insoluble starch. That means the starch that cannot be dissolved. It changes that starch into the sugar that can be dissolved. All right. Now next, food will go into the stomach. Now what happens when the food reaches our stomach? From the mouth, the food passes through a tube called the food pipe into the stomach. The stomach secretes digestive juices, and the muscles of the stomach helps in churning and mixing the food with these juices. The digestive juice breaks down the food into simpler forms. So it says here, after chewing our food in the mouth, then the food passes through a tube called the food pipe. So when we swallow our food, the food will pass through a tube that is called a food pipe, and this tube, it leads into your stomach. Now the stomach, what happens when the food reaches the stomach? The stomach will begin to produce these digestive juices. That means these juices that helps in the digestion of the food. So the stomach begins to secrete these digestive juices, and the muscles of the stomach helps in churning and mixing the food with these juices. Now the stomach, after it has produces these digestive juices which helps in the digestion of food, then the muscles of the stomach will help in Mixing these juices along with the food that we eat helps in churning, that means to break down the food, and also helps in mixing the food with these juices. The digestive juices breaks down the food into simpler form. Now these digestive juices that are being produced by the stomach, what do? They help in breaking down the food into simpler form. Now next, let us see what happens inside our intestine. From the stomach, the food goes into a long coiled tube called small intestine. The inside walls of the small intestine produce a juice that mixes with the food and further breaks it down into simpler substances. The liver and pancreas secrete more digestive juices into the small intestine. So after the food has been churned and mixed inside the stomach, then the food, it goes into a long coiled tube. That means this small intestine, it is like a coiled tube. That means it is very coiled and it's long and it looks like a tube. So food goes into a long coiled tube called small intestine. So remember that our small intestine, it looks like a coiled tube. That means it is like a coil and it is tube-like. So the inside walls of the small intestine produces a juice that mixes with the food and further breaks it down into simpler substances. So again, inside the small intestine, some more digestive juices are being produced so that the food will be further broken down into simpler substances. So now next, the liver and the pancreas also begins to secrete these digestive juices into the small intestine. So remember that from the stomach, the food will go into the small intestine, and then there in the small intestine, these walls of the small intestine will begin to produce these digestive juices, which mixes with the food and again breaks the food into much more simpler substances. Then after that, even the liver and the pancreas will secrete more digestive juices into the small intestine. So all these digestive juices, they help in the breaking down of the food to make it into simpler substances. Now these juices helps in complete digestion of the food. The food is now in liquid form. The process of digestion ends here. So as I said here, all these juices, they help in making the food into a much more simpler substances. So after this, the food will become like liquid. That means it will become watery. Liquid means water-like. It looks like water. So remember, right from the time the food enters our mouth, it is solid. But by the time it reaches our small intestine, the food will become liquid. It will be in liquid form. So this process of digestion ends here. So after the digestion of food in the small intestine, the process of digestion will end there in the small intestine. Next, what will happen? The walls of the small intestine have tiny finger-like structures called villi, which absorb all the nutrients from the digestive food and send them to the blood. The blood distributes nutrients obtained from the food to all parts of the body. Now what happens next is that inside the small intestine, it has these finger-like structures. You can see in this picture, they look like fingers. They are called villi. These villi, they absorb the nutrients and they absorb all the food that has been digested, all the liquid form of food, and they send them to the blood. So remember that inside the small intestine, there are tiny finger-like structures called villi, which absorb all the nutrients from the digestive food and send them to the blood. Now, the blood distributes these nutrients obtained from the food to all parts of the body. So, after the food is being absorbed by the villi, then the blood will take in this food and distribute it to all parts of our body. Now, next is the food that cannot be digested by our body goes into the large intestine where water is absorbed from it. This results in the formation of feces that pass out of the body through the anus. So, what happens to the food that cannot be digested then? So, all the food that cannot be digested by our body will go into the large intestine. And what happens to this food in the large intestine? All the water that is present along with the undigested food will be absorbed will be absorbed in the large intestine, and then what will form after that? After the absorption of the water, it will form feces that pass out of the body through the anus. So after the water is being absorbed in the large intestine, there will be a formation of feces. That means the waste that we throw out of our body, and it will pass out of our body through the anus. Now let us see what are some of the good eating habits, that we should learn. Now the first one, eat food at fixed times. So we should always remember to eat food at the correct timing and at the same time every day. We should not eat our food too late, all right, because it will not be good for your digestion. Because if you eat it too late, then you will just after you finish to eat your food, then you will sleep. Then that is not good for your digestion, all right. Now, number 2 is chew food well before swallowing. So always remember, when you eat your food, always chew it well before you swallow, so that it will be easy for your stomach to digest your food. Now, number 3, eat a balanced diet. As I told you, what is a balanced diet? A diet that contains all the nutrients in proper amount that is required by our body is called a balanced diet. Number 4 is do not overeat. Do not overeat means that when you eat and when you feel that you are full, stop eating and do not continue eating. That is called overeat. If you continue to eat even though you feel that you are full, you should not eat, all right? So that is overeat. Now number 5 is eat lots of green vegetables and fruits. So you should remember that whenever you eat your food, you should also include fruits and vegetables. You should always include green vegetables and always eat fruits as well. Now number 6 is always wash your hands before and after eating. So remember that before you eat your food, you should wash your hands with soap and water, and also after eating your food, you should wash your hands with soap and water. Number 7 is the place where you eat must be clean and tidy. So remember that your table, your room, anywhere that you eat your food, it should be clean and tidy. It should not be dirty. It should not be dirty. Why? Because if it is dirty, that means it will be unhealthy for you. So always keep your kitchen or your dining room clean, all right? Now, number 8 is drink plenty of water. So you should always remember to drink plenty of water every day, and the amount of water that you should drink every day is 8 to 10 glasses of water every day. All right. Now, number 9, eat fried foods, sweets, and ice cream occasionally. So remember that you should always eat fried foods, sweets, and ice cream occasionally. It means that only sometimes, not every day, not all the time, but only sometimes, because they are not good for you. They are not healthy. They will not keep you healthy. So remember to avoid fried foods, sweets, and ice cream. Number 10 is avoid drinking soft drinks in excess. So remember that you should not drink soft drinks. Soft drinks are those cold drinks that you used to drink. All those Coca-Cola, Sprite, Fanta, all those are your soft drinks. So you should not drink soft drinks too much. All right. And number 11, last, avoid the so-called energy drinks as they are of very little nutritional value. So you should not drink those energy drinks that they used to show in television, that when you drink those drinks you're going to get energy. But you should not drink those drinks as they don't have any nutrition in them. All right. So remember all these good eating habits, and learn properly this chapter, what is a balanced diet, and learn properly the process of digestion. And then after that, I'm going to attach some questions along with this video, and you try to answer so that I will understand whether you have understand this chapter or not. All right. So thank you, class, and have a nice day.